Hello, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with codependency. My name is Mary. Hello.
I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. It was my struggles with drugs and alcohol that brought me here. My name's Mac. Hey, everybody. So Jonathan was telling a little bit about our trek here. We plowed for 2 days, and there was nothing that was going to stop us from getting here. And then the night before we were going to leave, I told Mary we need to run to town. The roads are plowed now, but it was still snowing then. So we went to town real quick. We came back, and about a quarter mile from the beginning of our driveway, there was a truck and trailer jackknifed across the road and stuck there. And nobody was in the vehicle. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, they locked it up, the camper, nobody was in there. I mean, I'm trying to get in there. I'm going to break in the truck now. I mean, and we're like, what are we going to do? We got to get to the house to get our stuff so we can get out the next morning. Well, we went back in the national forest where we live. We found some campers after going to several different campsites. And we finally found the guy that said, yeah, that's my truck. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to back that thing down the hill. I got to get in there. And so I got him down there. He was, let's just say, a little bit less than sober. But Mary was like, you need to drive his truck. I said, I'm not driving his truck. If he's going to wreck it, he's going to wreck it, not me. But anyway, we got him out, and we got back to our house and got out the next morning. So we're glad to be here with you guys tonight. Somebody asked me earlier tonight. Yeah. Somebody asked me earlier tonight. They sort of did a double take when they saw me, and I'm like, oh, what have I done? Was there something on my face? And they said, are you a prophet? I said, no, I look like a prophet, but I'm not a prophet. I do have some news, though. I was recruited this year by the International Real Bearded Santa Clauses of America. And before you think, is he kidding? No, that's a real deal. I had to pass a background check to be in this. Thank God for Celebrate Recovery, I passed, right? And so the next 2 months I'll be doing what I love to do, and that's make little children smile. So it's going to be a fun time. And Miss Claus will be with me. So, it's going to be fun. All right, now, we're going to get into God's story in our life. My childhood was pretty uneventful in terms of abuse. My parents loved me. They set good standards for me to live by, even though they were very strict. So try as I might, I really can't look back and blame others for my actions that now looking back brought great shame and guilt to not only me, but to my family. But today, because of Jesus Christ, I don't have to live in the past anymore. I am indeed free. You know, ironically, though, I spent a lifetime searching for freedom in all the wrong people, places, and things. My dad was in the military, so by the time I was 15 years old, we had moved 8 different times. I learned how to blend in and make friends very quickly. I had to in order to survive. My dad preached wherever he was stationed, so I knew about God, I knew about heaven, and I knew about hell. And I remember fear being the motivating factor for me being baptized when I was 12 years old. I was at a church summer camp when this took place, and the fact that there were a couple good-looking girls being baptized made my decision easy. I appeared to enter a relationship with God, but it was for all the wrong reasons. 2 weeks later at that same church summer camp, I was introduced to marijuana by one of the Christian counselors. I found a group of people who looked like me. They were having lots of fun. That's when I decided, who needs to live in fear anymore? It was the end of the 60s and the early 70s. All kinds of drugs were available. It became my mission to try them all, and that's exactly what I did. I believed I was invincible, not realizing that I had set the pace for my eventual destruction. My dad was retiring from the military and decided to go to seminary to become a full-time pastor. So we moved to West Monroe, Louisiana. How would I ever find others who like to do what I like to do now? Amazingly enough, though, within a week after moving, I found that the same people lived in Louisiana. They just had different names. I never ran out of drugs, and acceptance was immediate. When we got to Louisiana... What? Some of y'all look like that too. I know it. Yeah, we had hair issues in our family, so still do, but that's another story. When we got to Louisiana, my parents sent me to church summer camp because they believed that that would surely straighten me out. That's where I met Mary. And at the end of that week of camp, I was courageous enough to ask her out through somebody else.
I grew up an elder's kid in our church. My parents lived out the Deuteronomy verse to tie God's word as symbols around your hands and teach them to your children as you walk by them day after day. During my childhood, my mother wrote Bible verses on 3x5 cards and taped them up all over our bathroom walls. As I would get dressed in the morning, there staring me in the face would be several verses I would read over and over. It just became a habit without me even realizing it. I grew up feeling totally cared for, in love and security. I was baptized at 12 years old, telling myself I would never sin again.
A new school year began. Mary was a senior and I was a junior. Life was great. We continued dating, and one day we skipped school and went to Mary's house. I talked her into having sex the first time for both of us with that manipulative line, "If you loved me, you would." 2 weeks later, she didn't start her period, and we thought, no way, surely you can't get pregnant after just one time.
4 months later, I found out. I finally consulted a doctor, and yes, I was pregnant. No one had been pregnant outside of marriage in our church, so we had a secret. During my childhood, my mother had a mental illness, and she suffered in mental hospitals and was a test subject for drugs that kept her debilitated for much of her childhood. My sweet mother, who loved me the best she knew how, didn't notice that I had a growing belly. I decided it was confession time to my dad. I walked into the den where my dad was taking a nap. I had snuggled up next to him many times throughout the years on that big old flowered sofa while he read Bible stories to me, and we talked about God's love. I knelt down next to him and said softly, "We need to talk, Daddy." I was prepared for him to point his finger and say all kinds of harsh words, but the exact opposite happened. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he said he would support and love me always. I told him my plans of moving out of town and placing my baby in adoption. 3 months later, it was August 17th, 1975. Remember that date as it's important later in our story. The doctor left me in a tiny room all by myself. Labor lasted for 12 hours with no pain medicine and no family. And as they rushed me into the delivery room, a nurse shoved a gas mask over my face. I thought they were suffocating me to punish me for what I had done. The physical and emotional pain was unbearable. I asked the lawyer if I could see my baby just one time, but he said no. I returned home 2 weeks later and then enrolled in a Christian college out of state. My dad was hoping to get me away from Mac.
But I followed because, again, my parents thought if they just sent me to the right Christian school, that would surely fix me. Guess what? I found the same people that loved to party on my first day of campus. As a matter of fact, I found that Christian counselor that was at that church summer camp who had first introduced me to marijuana 6 years earlier. So I was a freshman rooming with seniors. That was not a good place for me to be. Halfway through the semester, I sneaked out of the dorm past curfew to smoke a joint with a friend. I got busted, kicked out of school, and sent home. Mary and I both came back home and were married 3 weeks later. Married life was... It's the same hair.
I actually cut it too before the wedding. It was a grocery shack full.
Married life was great. We partied all the time. Later, we would come to understand that that would help mask the guilt of giving up our baby all those years before. 3 years later, Mary told me she was quitting the party scene and wanted to have another baby. I said, "Go ahead, we can do that, but I'm not quitting what I'm doing. This is how you married me. This is how I'll be to the day I die." We were living two very different lives while growing further and further apart. I stayed away from the house as much as possible, working overtime to pay for my drug habit.
Over the next 7 years, I held on to the verses I remembered reading as a child on my bathroom wall. In Isaiah 55:11, it says, "When God's word is spoken, it does not come back empty, but will accomplish what he desires and achieve the purpose for which he sent it." I would repeat Isaiah 41:10 to myself the way I remembered my mother quoted it slowly and distinctly. "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Now I had two secrets I carried. We had a son we would never know, and now I had an insane husband. And I say insane because I didn't know all the drugs he was doing and its effects. So I walked on eggshells to keep peace. I wore my mask to church every Sunday. I just wanted my insides to feel like everyone else looked on the outside. Perfect, I thought. My feeble prayer at the time was that Mac would just stay awake and hear the message. Never in my wildest dreams did I think of better things like Mac becoming an elder in our church, one day start a CR ministry, and become the global director of Celebrate Recovery. And the only reason I share these things with you is to confirm that God does take broken lives and does exceedingly more than we can ask or imagine.
One thing I said I would never do was use needles. For the last 2 years of my addiction, methamphetamine had become my drug of choice. I was shooting up many times a day. Then one Sunday morning, after being awake for a week, God gave me the greatest gift of my life. It was a moment of clarity, a moment of clear, right, sane thinking. I was crashed out in the bed, and Callie, our 4-year-old daughter, come and stood beside the bed and said to her mom, "Why doesn't Daddy go to church with us anymore? Why doesn't Daddy do anything with us anymore?" Mary, in her codependency, said, "He's been working hard, sweetie. He needs to sleep. You need to leave him alone." Callie, though, would not be deterred and replied, "If he ain't going, then I ain't going either." I pretended to be asleep and not hear what she said, but I heard every word. They left for church that Sunday morning. I felt like I'd run into a brick wall. God used that little girl that morning to break my heart. I realized in that moment of clarity that I was killing everybody that I claimed to love. It was as if my eyes were open for the first time, seeing the insanity of all my poor choices. So I collected my drugs, paraphernalia, everything, and went outside and burned it all. I knew if I didn't, I would talk myself into using one more time.
That Sunday, the sermon was on confession and how good it is for the soul. And I remember the song, "It Is Well With My Soul." And the words hung in my throat. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't well with me, and it wasn't well with our daughters, and it wasn't well with the man I left at home. I just wanted to run out of the building. Arriving home, I found Max sitting in his recliner, and I had never seen him cry, and I had no idea what he was about to say.
I had been raised, who's a man? And real men don't cry, and they never show weakness, and I never did either. But what I found in those tears that morning was relief like I'd never known in my life. I told Mary I want to start a new life. Then something very different happened. Mary, for the first time, stepped out of her codependency and said,
"Well, now, who are you going to call? I'm tired of keeping secrets."
"I told you that I was going to change. What more do you want?"
"We need someone to help us. Would you talk to Pastor Ray?"
Well, Ray happened to be the pastor at the church Mary was attending regularly. He'd been coming to my cabinet shop for years, and he'd get me to build things for him, only to find out later they were things he didn't even really need. He was selling them. But he was coming because he saw something in me that nobody else did. He saw someone who was worthwhile, not worth less. So Ray came over that day to pray with us, and he said, "You know, you don't have to confess this before the whole church, but if you do, it might help somebody else that's struggling with the same thing." So Mary and I took his word for it. We went to church that night, and we went down front for the altar call. That Sunday night that we went down, we expected the church to shun us and tell us never come back here again, but the exact opposite happened. The whole church came down afterwards, and they hugged us, and they cried with us, and they said, you know, we don't know quite what to do with you. You're our first drug addict. But we love you, and we want you to keep coming back. And I heard that loud and clear. They said I could come back. Well, there was a little lady there who came up to us that night, and she said, Mac, I think you need to go to AA. And I said, is that like a car club? She goes, no, that's AAA. You need AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Then she told Mary she knew a man that ran a treatment center and thought I ought to go talk to him. So Mary asked, would you be willing to go talk to this man about going into a rehab center? I said, Mary, I'm not crazy. I don't need that. But if you want me to go, I'll go. But you'll see, he won't want me to stay. Well, after much discussion with the head guy, that's not what he said. He said he did want me to stay. And I said, okay, I'll stay. But Mary, I'll got to go home and I got to get my stuff.
And I said, that's okay. Your stuff's in the trunk.
Yeah, that is codependent no more. Whew. Our life became a whirlwind after that. 90 meetings in 90 days. That's what they told me I needed to do. Well, I'm an overachiever, so I did 140 meetings in 90 days. Bible studies, we were making new friends. A whole new life was opening up before us. It was fantastic. We started Overcomers Outreach at our church 2 years later, which we led for 14 years. We had approximately 20 to 30 that were coming on a regular basis. Many people were coming to know Jesus and coming clean because of this hope that we'd found and that we couldn't keep to ourselves.
Okay, now it really gets good. The only other people that knew about our son were my dad, my brother John, and his wife Chris. Fast forward to spring 1988, 1 month after Mac yielded to God, God gave us a surprise gift. Our church youth group was going to a youth rally 5 hours away, and my sister-in-law, Chris, was one of the chaperones. Well, the lawyer who handled our adoption would never tell us our son's name until the lawyer, found out he had terminal cancer. He felt like before he died, he needed to tell us our son's name, which turned out to be Heath Arthur. They were assigning groups to stay in homes, and by the time they got to Chris's group, they had run out of homes. So they asked if they would mind staying in a town close by. As the suitcases were being loaded in the car of a very friendly couple, Chris asked if they had any children. When the woman said they had a son named Heath, a funny feeling came over her. So she asked his age. Heath's mother said he was 12. So she went one step further and asked, when is his birthday? Heath's mother said August 17th. The date Heath, our son, was born, August 17th, 1975. At 2:00 a.m., our phone rang. There was no such things as cell phones then, so she called me from the Arthur's Kitchen Phone Collect. And she whispered, you'll never imagine where I'm at right now. And I said, half asleep, where? And she replied, Heath's bed. Well, there's a family in our church who has the last name Heath, so I questioned her, what are you doing in Mr. Heath's bed? And she exclaimed, no, Heath, your son. Mac and I laughed, we cried, and we thanked God all night. At that time, Heath's parents never knew who she was. We feel God gave us that gift at a time in our lives to reassure us our son was loved and cared for in a Christian home. Then after waiting 7 more years, in August 1994, we got the call we always hoped we would get. When Heath was about to turn 19, his parents contacted us that he would like to meet us on his birthday. And my dad was in charge of videoing the momentous occasion, but as we sat down later to view it, the whole first part of the reunion video was showing the ground. My dad was so excited he forgot he was holding the camera.
After leading Overcomers Outreach for 13 years, Mary's brother, John, happened to be out at Saddleback Church, and he came back and told us about a little ministry that they were doing called Celebrate Recovery, and he said, you really ought to go check it out. But in my mind, I already knew everything about recovery. What did this big church have to tell me? I learned later from my sponsor that this type of thinking was contempt prior to investigation. In other words, if you think you know everything, you will never be able to learn anything. Well, Mary's brother would not stop asking us about Celebrate Recovery and when we were going to go check it out. So finally I said, okay, just to have him stop asking us. And I thought we'd go to California, have a little vacation, and attend this thing they call the Summit. Well, the first day we got there at 8 o'clock in the morning early, because I thought if we got there early, we could leave early and do what was really important, check out Southern California, right? Well, we ended up staying until 9 o'clock that night. Well, the next day we arrived at 8 again because I'm hard-headed, and I was going to leave early that day. Well, we ended up staying until 10 o'clock that night. At the end of the day, I turned to Mary and I said, we're stopping what we're doing this. Look at how many more people we can help, more than just drug addicts and alcoholics, anybody with a hurt, hang-up, or habit. So we started Celebrate Recovery in West Monroe, Louisiana on December 31st. That's right, New Year's Eve, 2004. Yeah, it was a great night to start. You know, we love watching God's plan for our life unfold as he surrounds us with more and more amazing people. Sam, who had been a pastor for 40 years, tried to commit suicide. The Pharisees in the church had finally gotten to him, and the only way he could get through what they were doing to him was do something that said he would never do, and that was take a drink. Well, that one drink turned into every Monday morning after Sunday services concluded on Sunday. He had been drinking for 10 years, and nobody knew except his wife. Finally, he couldn't take the hypocrisy of his own life anymore, and that's when the suicide attempt happened. So along with the bottle, he took a handful of pills so he could just end it all. When he did that, he was moved from pastor to one of those people. And if you're one of those people, the ones with the big problems, I'm the one that gets the call. So I got the call and I went to see him immediately. He was in ICU and he was unconscious. And even though he was unconscious, I prayed over him and said, Sam, do not give up. God still has big plans for you. And I talked very loudly over him. Over the next few weeks, I shared with him about the hope that God still had for him and how God would still use him. So Sam, in his early 70s, became a part of our Celebrate Recovery ministry. He would call me all during the week and say, hey, Mac, you want to go to another meeting? He was old, but he was wearing me out. He was at one of our small groups one night, and he came in really excited, and he said, Mac, I got to tell you something. You're not going to believe it. I met your son's parents at church on Sunday. I said, Sam, everybody has. They go to church here now. He said, no, you don't understand. 40 years ago, when I first became a pastor, I performed their wedding ceremony. That's right, before our son was ever conceived, God had a plan to use Sam to marry the couple that will later adopt our son and then later allow me to be instrumental in giving Sam the hope that his relationship with God could not only be restored, but that God would continue to use him. So here's what I know about that. I don't know where you're at today or what you're going through, but I would tell you this, hang on, because God always sees the big picture. He's always right on time, and he's either coming back or he's coming through.
Remember when Max said we had 20 to 30 attending our Overcomers group, a ministry that was already working? Well, now through Celebrate Recovery in West Monroe, Louisiana, they have grown to an average attendance on Friday nights to over 500 people. So good. We are in awe as we see God's favor on the CR movement all over the world of passionate people on a mission for Him. 36 years ago, I prayed God would just keep Mac awake in church. God has truly taken the ashes of our lives and turned them into something beautiful. I believe when God said in Joel 2, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. And look what God did. God blessed us with 10 grandchildren. In my Bible, Isaiah 59:21 says, as for me, God says, this is my covenant with you and Mac, my spirit that I've placed upon you and the words that I've given you to speak. They're not going to leave your mouths, nor the mouths of your children, nor the mouths of your grandchildren. You'll keep repeating these words and won't ever stop. God's orders.
Yeah. We're grateful for Celebrate Recovery as it continues to grow and affect more and more people and enriches our lives continually by the new people God brings into our lives. Our forever family is getting bigger and bigger. We're here with you tonight because you're our family. And by the way, you're stuck with me for eternity. So we're going to party. Yeah. You know, we've been working the 12 steps for over 36 years now. I've never found another program or ministry who moves people through the steps, or more importantly to us, moves people through the Beatitudes. You know how Jesus told us how to live? Like Celebrate Recovery does. So being on the front line of what we believe is the outreach ministry of the church, today we're able to bind up the brokenhearted, and we proclaim freedom for the captives of sin in Jesus' name, and release from darkness the prisoners of hurts, hang-ups, and habits.
Celebrate Recovery has helped us reach more hurting people to find healing than we could have ever imagined. Mac and I are in the second half of our lives now. I like to call it the young old stage. Woo! And we are expecting to see in our lives what God did for Job in Job 42:12. And that says, so the Lord blessed Job in the second half of his life even more than in the beginning. While on this earth, none of us will be exempt from pain. So this verse has become our family prayer. And we believe God still has a good plan, not only for our family, but your family too. Thank you for letting us share.